අද්විතීය 200 Mbps ස්පීඩ් එකකින් ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ වේගවත්ම සහ පුළුල්තම හෝම් බ්‍රෝඩ්බෑන්ඩ් සම්බන්ධතාවය වන SLT මොබිටෙල් දේශීය ෆයිබර් බලවේගය ඔබත් අදම අත්විඳින්න.
හරිම සුදුයි.
Tonight on First at 9, this Thursday, the 25th of May 2023. Align with Asia. President Ranil Wickremesinghe calls Asia to integrate amid US-China rivalry, says Asia is the choice. Bilateral talks. Sri Lanka's debt restructuring talks can be concluded by September. Sri Lanka's president expresses confidence during discussion with Japanese Premier Fumio Kishida.
So I should be able by September or November the latest to conclude the debt restructuring talks.
No pain, no gain. CBS chief highlights importance of corrective policy measures to overcome the crisis and restore stability in the economy.
Alliance Finance මෙතුරු රන්නයි සේවාවෙන් රන් පවුම්කට රුපියල් 1,70,000ක ඉහළ අධිකාරම. ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දිනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9 with Ndivadi Amuata. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
We welcome you warmly to our news on AdaDerana 24, your English news service, and we take you straight to your top story making headlines tonight. President Ranil Wickremesinghe today addressed Nikkei's Future of Asia Forum, considered to be one of the most important global conferences in Asia, attended by prominent leaders and academics of the region. The Sri Lankan president highlighted the importance of countries in the region aligning for the greater integration of Asia and a stable, constructive relationship with China, saying the pressure on Asian countries to choose between the United States and China is resisted by many and that the choice itself is Asia. President said he intends to apply for membership in the regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership trade bloc with the aim of achieving a higher level of economic liberalization in the country. As for Sri Lanka's financial crisis, President Wickremesinghe said it is important for the debt restructuring exercise succeed because Sri Lanka's experience will enable more middle-income countries to utilize the IMF for debt relief.
Organized by Nikkei every year since 1995, the forum brings together prominent political, economic and academic leaders from the Asia-Pacific region to offer their opinions on regional issues and the role of Asia in the world. President Ranil Wickremesinghe addressed the Nikkei Forum 28th Future of Asia on the theme Leveraging Asia's Power to Confront Global Challenges.
Despite setbacks on the global stage, Asia has the potential for continued growth. Not only has Asia become the global economic powerhouse of our age and the most dynamic region, but it's also on an unprecedented upward trajectory. Thus, the centrality of the global economy is shifting to Asia. The region's economy is already similar in size to those of Europe and North America. And as the global economy seeks to recoup, Asia and Pacific is predicted to contribute. Sri Lanka is the oldest democracy in Asia, with a parliament tracing its origins to 1835 and universal franchise sustained from 1931. Yet, our multi-party political system is not the norm in other parts of Asia. The entry of the Asian juggernaut in the form of China, the ASEAN, Tigers and India have effectively changed the international economic order of the 20th century. Yet, these gains are at risk today as Asia confronts debt sustainability, decoupling and economic cohesion, Sri Lanka being one of the first and worst affected. As a middle-income country, Sri Lanka accepted that time is of essence in resolving the issues of debt sustainability, and the only option available for vulnerable middle-income countries is to seek the assistance of the IMF to ensure multilateral coordination and cooperation in debt restructuring. We have now started creditors' meeting and hope for a successful conclusion before the end of 2023. Sri Lanka is dedicated to ensure equal treatment for all creditors. We want this exercise to succeed because our experience will enable more middle-income countries to utilize the IMF in ensuring multilateral coordination for debt relief. Asia has become the crux of US-China rivalry. One thing is certain, Asian countries do not wish to be forced to manage competing pressure from these two sides. We in Asia don't want to choose between US and China. Many of us cannot make that choice because we have already made our choice, another choice, and that choice is Asia. We want an Asia that can accommodate the Indo-Pacific, the BRI, as well as the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific. The BRI is a strategy to increase China's influence in Asia and Africa through economic means. We, the members of the BRI, have no security arrangements with China, nor do we intend to enter into any security arrangements with China. Sri Lanka is committed to multi-layered connectivity in the Indo-Pacific. Furthermore, we also support Prime Minister Kishida's principles for peace and rules for prosperity. In keeping with the rules for prosperity, Sri Lanka will apply for membership to the RCEP with the aim of achieving a higher level of economic liberalization. Sri Lanka welcomes the G7's announcement that they are prepared to build a stable and constructive relationship with China. This is essential, as espoused by Prime Minister Kishida in New Delhi earlier this year when presenting Japan's new plan for a free and open Indo-Pacific. I quote, "The approach we should take going forward is rule-making through dialogue that respects the historical and cultural diversity of each country. The equal partnership among nations is crucial for the emergence of a peaceful and prosperous Asian region. We also support a dialogue between all Asian nations. In this context, Sri Lanka is the view that Japan, China, India, and ASEAN should commence an open-ended dialogue among themselves and thereafter with the other Asian countries. This will be the first step in establishing a new framework for peace and cooperation in Asia."
Well, President Ranil Wickremesinghe meanwhile expressed his regret to the Japanese government for the suspension of the light rail transit project, which was being implemented with Japanese funding. Now, during a meeting in Tokyo with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, the Sri Lankan president emphasized the need for future legislation in parliament to ensure that bilateral large-scale projects are not halted without the agreement of both parties concerned. During the meeting with the Japanese Premier, President Wickremesinghe also expressed confidence that Sri Lanka will be able to conclude debt restructuring by September this year.
President Ranil Wickremesinghe held bilateral talks with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida this morning in Tokyo. During the discussion, President Wickremesinghe expressed his regret to the Japanese government for the suspension of the Colombo Light Rail Transit project, which was being implemented with Japanese support. The head of state also emphasized the need for future legislation in parliament to ensure that bilateral large-scale projects cannot be halted or cancelled without the agreement of both parties.
We have made headway, remarkable headway, as far as the debt restructuring is concerned. We've been talking with all the creditors. Even China has now joined in on the talk, both on the creditor talk. They also have bilateral talks with us, but not of a major concern, since it seems to be more ritual of ensuring that they keep to their positions that there should be separate talks. But we told them that there will be no separate treatment and all parties will be treated alike. So I should be able by September or November the latest to conclude the debt restructuring talks. So that would mean the end of that phase of Sri Lanka's economic crisis, and we have to get ahead of it. And again, I have come here to formally express our regrets over the manner in which relations with Japan were conducted in the last few years. Before I came, after long discussions in Cabinet on the options, we will now bring a law to Parliament where mega projects like the projects that involve LRT and others once has to be tabled in Parliament, and there has to be annual reports of progress, and it cannot in any way be amended or cancelled unless there is agreement on both sides. So that law will be, once the law is in place, that will give assurance, because we are also very concerned that this happened even without Parliament being notified, since many members of that government group.
In another meeting in Tokyo, President Ranil Wickremesinghe met Japanese Finance Minister Shunichi Suzuki to discuss Sri Lanka's debt restructuring and the International Monetary Fund's EFF program implementation. Subsequently, President Wickremesinghe met with Japanese Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi, focusing on strengthening long-term bilateral relations between Sri Lanka and Japan, including increased cooperation in economic and cultural fields. President Ranil Wickremesinghe and former Prime Minister of Japan Yasuo Fukuda attended a breakfast meeting organized by the Japan-Sri Lanka Association. According to the President's office, the President briefed the former Prime Minister of Japan on the ongoing recovery program in Sri Lanka. Furthermore, meetings were also held between the former Prime Ministers of Japan Taro Aso, Yoshihide Suga and President Ranil Wickremesinghe, focusing on potential steps to strengthen the existing close and friendly relationship with Sri Lanka. The President also engaged in bilateral talks with Singaporean Deputy Prime Minister Lawrence Wong in Tokyo today. During the meeting, President Wickremesinghe had reaffirmed Sri Lanka's commitment to implementing Singapore Free Trade Agreement.
Also making news tonight, remains of the late businessman Dinesh Shafter, whose death last year still remains a mystery, were exhumed this morning at the Boralla Cemetery. The exhumation was conducted with police protection and under supervision of the Colombo Additional Magistrate Rajendra Jayasuriya and a 5-member committee of judicial and forensic medical experts appointed to uncover the cause of his death.
The exhumation began at around 8:45 am at the Boralla Public Cemetery under the supervision of Colombo Additional Magistrate Rajendra Jayasuriya and the 5-member committee of judicial and forensic medical experts. Special security measures were in place around the Boralla General Cemetery. Within an hour's time, remains of late Dinesh Shafter were exhumed in the presence of his family and relatives. Police scene of crime officers were seen capturing photographs and video footages, while officers of the Criminal Investigation Department recorded evidence. The body was then taken to the Karapetia Teaching Hospital for a forensic autopsy. The second post-mortem examination is to be conducted at the Karapetia Hospital mortuary tomorrow. Meanwhile, Colombo Additional Magistrate Rajendra Jayasuriya conducted the magisterial inquest at the same location and ordered the next inquest to be held on the 20th of June. The 5-member committee meanwhile investigated the area where the late businessman's vehicle was found, with him tied inside on December 15th last year. The remains were exhumed based on a request by the 5-member committee of judicial and forensic medical experts appointed to uncover the actual reason behind the death of Dinesh Shafter. The committee was appointed on the 27th of February after contradictions in post-mortem reports. The initial post-mortem report concluded that the death was caused by strangulation, but after a second post-mortem, the court was informed on the 9th of February that Shafter's death was caused by ingestion of cyanide.
Corrective policy measures essential for the Sri Lankan economy, says Central Bank Chief. We'll bring you details on the other side of this break.
ගොඩමඩ පෙරලි කරන බලපුළුවන්කාරයා මහින්ද්‍රා යුවෝ ඩීමෝ වෙතින්. වැඩම ගොඩයි ගොඩම තමයි ස්වරාජ් ට්‍රැක්ටර් ඩීමෝ වෙතින්.
We take you to business news now. Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe reiterates a commitment to bring the rate of inflation in Sri Lanka down to single-digit range by the fourth quarter of this year or even earlier. Addressing a symposium in Colombo today, the central bank chief said corrective policy measures are essential to restore economic conditions that are essential for businesses and entrepreneurs, even though they are painful in the short term.
The National Policy Symposium on Promoting Investments and Youth Entrepreneurship in Sri Lanka, organised by the International Labour Organisation in collaboration with the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, the Office of the Governor of the Northern Province and the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, was held in Colombo this morning.
Actually look at taking this work forward in a sustainable way that will generate the kind of economic recovery for the people but also for the country at a much needed time going forward, one that is beyond just talking about financial figures and debt restructuring, but really at the heart of it bringing the people and these small enterprises, these burgeoning and wanting to be entrepreneurs to the forefront for the future and the present job creation and revenue generation, and also inspire private sector, which is quite robust in many respects here in Sri Lanka, to be very much at the forefront of the solutions to the crisis that the country is facing. So how can they bring their foothold to bring along those that have been left behind and to promote greater growth and investment and well-being, inclusive well-being for all the youth, women, and persons with disabilities going forward, but not to forget men, of course, as well.
How you promote youth entrepreneurship? The first one is that you need to inculcate this culture as is how do you promote and your children, next generation, is very important in this kind of period. It's different now. I don't think any educated youth now if they're looking for public employment or any formal kind of employment, you have very less opportunity. Only way out is to me is to promote youth entrepreneurship. That's the only way for them to have a better living standard, better life, and for the better economy. And government has no longer capacity to absorb any more public employment. Very few. But given the supply of youth, educated youth in this country, I don't think government can absorb. In fact, government will have to bring down the labor force in terms of because of the fiscal issues. Sri Lanka has been ranked at 101 out of 137 countries in the Global Entrepreneurship Index. We are pretty low, that's based on 2019 data, reflecting the dire need to promote a conducive environment for entrepreneurship development. And low participation of women entrepreneurs is also a key factor, especially girls are always looking for public sector employment. That has also negatively weighed on the development of Sri Lankan entrepreneurship. Recognizing the importance of promoting investments and entrepreneurship in Sri Lanka in relation to the country's future growth trajectory, the Central Bank continues to provide support to enterprise sector in its different capacities. Inflation is the number one enemy for any economy that we have experienced. Now is coming down gradually. Central Bank took decisive measures to contain the rise in inflation and also balance of payment stresses. We have taken very decisive measures to curtail and prevent inflation rising going out of the control and went to the peak of 70%. Now is under around 30%. That certainly will be single digit by fourth quarter of this year and probably even earlier. That I can assure you with the measures that we have implemented. Those are not raising interest rates is not an easy thing, and those are painful for businesses and households in the short run. Such measures are imperative to prevent devastating impact of spiraling inflation and economic instabilities to restore economic conditions that are essential for economic stakeholders, including the businesses and entrepreneurs.
Meanwhile, in Parliament, parliamentarian of the Samagi Janabalawege, Dr. Harsha De Silva, highlighted the importance of integrating Sri Lanka with the world in terms of trade. Dr. De Silva said Sri Lanka's trade integration should not be limited to just one country.
While adding appreciation to the Japanese people for their help during the crisis, what we really need is trade integration. And for that, no longer should politicians hoodwink people. We must break down these protectionist walls. We need to build trade and investment bridges, not just to Japan. As I told, I took Japan as a case in point today, but to China, to India, to the European Union, to the United States and more. But we have to think beyond just saying, look, we are adjusting the tariff by such and such in such and such vehicles, that is in such and such cubic capacity is okay, but that is not going to cut it. This is just marginal changes. We have to have a mindset change. We have to ideological change. At least I'm happy, Honorable Acting Minister of Finance, that even at this late stage, you seem to be agreeing with what we have been saying for a long time. You seem to be wanting to integrate Sri Lanka with the world.
And at the Colombo Stock Exchange, shares commenced on an optimistic note yet succumbed to a downward trend towards midday and continued its volatile trajectory throughout the day. Both the all-share price index and the more liquid S&P SL 20 closed negative. Turnover crossed 893 million rupees, with John Q's holdings accounting for 50.7% of total turnover after an off-board transaction totaling 3.2 million shares at 140 rupees through foreign buying. Meanwhile, as a result of the rupee appreciation, export counters such as Expo witnessed lackluster investor sentiment. Capital goods sector was the top contributor to top turnover list, followed by food, beverage and tobacco sector. And let's take a look at how the Sri Lankan rupee traded today. In global markets, oil prices fell today after Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak played down the prospect of further OPEC Plus production cuts at its meeting next week.
Brent crude futures fell 0.5% to end the day at $77.95 a barrel, while US West Texas Intermediate crude fell 0.7% to end at $73.83. According to foreign media, the Russian Deputy Prime Minister had played down the prospect of further OPEC Plus output cuts, stating that there won't be any new steps because certain decisions were made regarding the voluntary reduction of oil production by some countries just a month ago. In the previous session, oil prices were supported by a warning from Saudi Arabia's energy minister that short sellers betting oil prices will fall should watch out for pain. Some investors took that as a signal that the OPEC Plus could consider further output cuts at a meeting scheduled to convene on the 4th of June. Meanwhile, price declines were limited by an unexpected massive fall of 12.5 million barrels to 455.2 million barrels in US crude oil inventories. Gasoline inventories dropped by 2.1 million barrels in the week to 216.3 million barrels, while distillate stockpiles fell by 600,000 barrels to 105.7 million barrels.
Well, that wraps up tonight's edition of First at 9 on AdaDerana 24. We'll see you again tomorrow at the same time. I'm Indivadi Amuatta. Good night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.